The most defining and devastating rupture in Baptist history occurred not over theology, but over the systemic institution of slavery. This conflict did more than split a denomination. It provided a religious parallel to the political fracturing of the Union. For decades, Baptists had attempted to maintain a neutral, non-interference policy regarding slavery to preserve denominational unity. However, by the 1840s, Northern Baptists increasingly labeled slavery a sin and moved to bar slaveholders from serving as missionaries. The breaking point came in 1845 when the Home Missions Board officially refused to appoint a slaveholder from Georgia. In response, Southern delegates met in Augusta, Georgia, to form the Southern Baptist Convention. While the SBC framed its departure as a defense of constitutional rights and the autonomy of local churches to choose their own leaders, the underlying motivation was the preservation of a social order that included chattel slavery. This split proved permanent. Unlike Methodists and Presbyterians who eventually reunited, Northern and Southern Baptists have remained separate for nearly 2 centuries. Perhaps the most significant development of the post-war era was the massive exodus of Black Baptists from white-controlled churches. During the era of slavery, Black members were often forced to attend white-pastored churches in a subordinate capacity. Following the Emancipation Proclamation, they moved rapidly to establish their own autonomous congregations. The Baptist model was uniquely suited to this moment. The congregational structure allowed for immediate self-governance and personal expression that was unavailable in more hierarchical denominations. The Black church became a training forum for community leaders, providing a space for social and political organization during the Reconstruction era. These local efforts eventually culminated in the 1895 founding of the National Baptist Convention, which became the primary organizational home for Black Baptists in America. By the late 19th century, the two white Baptist bodies were moving in opposite directions. Northern Baptists, later known as American Baptists, began to focus on the challenges of an industrializing society, grappling with European immigration and the emerging social gospel. Meanwhile, the Southern Baptist Convention consolidated its identity around a redemptive vision of the South, viewing their region as a bastion of conservative, literalist faith that would eventually redeem the nation. As the 20th century dawned, the Baptist landscape encountered an intellectual upheaval that threatened to dismantle the theological consensus of the previous century. This period was characterized by the fundamentalist modernist controversy, a struggle to define how ancient faith should interact with the emerging scientific and social realities of the modern world. Influenced by European higher criticism of the Bible and Darwinian evolution, many Baptist seminaries and urban pulpits, particularly in the North, began to embrace modernism. This movement sought to adapt Christian teaching to contemporary culture, often downplaying traditional doctrines like the virgin birth or the substitutionary atonement. For these thinkers, the reason of the faith shifted from individual salvation from hell to the collective salvation of society from poverty and injustice, focusing on a social gospel of systemic reform and ethical living. In response, a militant conservative movement emerged to defend the fundamentals of the faith. These fundamentalists viewed modernism not as an evolution of Christianity, but as a different religion entirely. The friction was most intense within the Northern Baptist Convention. Leaders like William Bell Riley argued that the denomination's institutional machinery had been captured by liberals who were abandoning the authority of Scripture. The struggle resulted in significant structural fragmentation. The General Association of Regular Baptist Churches, formed in 1932 by those who left the NBC, and the Conservative Baptist Association, established in 1947 as another exit ramp for those dissatisfied with the perceived drift of the Northern mainstream. While Northern Baptists were fracturing, Southern Baptists were consolidating. The SBC largely avoided the initial brunt of the modernist controversy due to its cultural isolation and regional homogeneity. In 1925, the SBC took 2 monumental steps to secure its future. The Baptist Faith and Message was the convention's first formal national confession of faith, designed to provide a fence against theological deviance. The cooperative program was a revolutionary financial mechanism that centralized funding for missions and education. This how of institutional success allowed the SBC to transition from a loose collection of churches into a highly efficient global missionary juggernaut. By the mid-20th century, the Southern Baptist Convention had become the dominant Protestant force in America, having built an institutional structure that could sustain its redemptive vision for the nation and the world. The post-World War II era saw the Baptist movement reach its zenith of cultural influence in America. This was the age of the big church, characterized by suburban expansion and a high degree of organizational sophistication. No longer confined to the Cotton Belt, the Southern Baptist Convention began a deliberate northern expansion, planting churches in every state. By the 1960s, the SBC had surpassed the Methodist Church to become the largest Protestant denomination in the United States. This growth was driven by a relentless focus on Sunday school growth and a corporate approach to church management that turned local pastors into CEOs of sprawling religious enterprises. Meanwhile, the Northern Baptist Convention renamed itself the American Baptist Churches USA, ABUSA, in 1972. The ABCUSA leaned into its role as a diverse ecumenical body. It became a theological laboratory for social justice, playing a pivotal role in the civil rights movement, most notably through its support of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an American Baptist minister who applied the Baptist distinctive of soul liberty to the struggle for racial equality. Outside the major conventions, the independent Baptist movement exploded. Propelled by the popularity of electronic preachers and massive bus ministries, these churches rejected all denominational ties, viewing even the SBC as too bureaucratic or compromising. Figures like Jerry Falwell transformed the independent Baptist identity from a quiet separatism into a potent political force, eventually birthing the moral majority, signaling the entry of Baptists into the heart of the culture wars. The final decades of the 20th century witnessed a conservative resurgence, or fundamentalist takeover, depending on one's perspective, that fundamentally altered the trajectory of the Southern Baptist Convention. Beginning in 1979, a well-organized group of conservatives launched a decade-long campaign to seize control of the SBC's leadership in seminaries. The central outworking of this movement was the use of the convention's democratic voting process to ensure that only those who held to biblical inerrancy were appointed to key positions. This was the belief that the Bible is without error in matters of history and science, as well as faith. This shift led to a secondary fracture. Thousands of moderate Southern Baptists, who felt the movement had become too narrow and political, exited to form new organizations. The Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, a network focused on local church autonomy, global missions, and a more inclusive approach to leadership, including the ordination of women, and the Alliance of Baptists, a smaller, more progressive body that emphasized social justice and ecumenical partnerships. Today, the Baptist label covers a vast and often contradictory spectrum, from the staunchly conservative SBC to the progressive ABCUSA, and from the vibrant, justice-oriented National Baptist conventions to the fiercely autonomous independent movements. The tradition remains as fragmented as it is fertile. In the 21st century, Baptists face new challenges. Like all American denominations, Baptists are seeing a rise in the nones, those who claim no religious affiliation. Modern Baptist bodies are increasingly forced to reckon with their historical legacies regarding race and gender, leading to new internal tensions and opportunities for reconciliation. The historical progression of Baptist denominations in America reveals a movement that thrives on the tension between the individual and the institution. By prioritizing the soul's competency before God, Baptists created a mechanism that ensures both constant renewal and perpetual division. Their story is a reflection of the American story, a restless, diverse, and deeply principled pursuit of a kingdom that is not of this world, yet very much at home in the American soil. The historical progression of Baptist denominations in America is a testament to the power of a decentralized, conscience-driven faith. What began as a despised sect of English dissenters has evolved into a cornerstone of American religious and social life. The movement's trajectory, from the radical experiments of Roger Williams to the massive institutional reach of the Southern Baptist Convention, reveals a tradition that is paradoxically both stubbornly independent and remarkably adaptable. The most profound impact of the Baptist movement lies in its successful advocacy for the separation of church and state. By insisting that the magistrate has no authority over the inner man, Baptists provided the theological and political scaffolding for the First Amendment. This contribution fundamentally altered the course of Western democracy, ensuring that religious pluralism became a foundational American value rather than a source of civil strife. The Baptist insistence on sole competency, the idea that every individual is capable of and responsible for their own relationship with God, became a spiritual parallel to the democratic ideals of the Enlightenment, empowering the common man and fueling the populist spirit of the American frontier. Furthermore, the Baptist tradition has served as a powerful engine for social change. While the denomination's history is marred by its role in defending slavery, the very tools of Baptist ecclesiology, local autonomy, and the prophetic voice of the pulpit were used by African American Baptists to dismantle those same systems of oppression. The Black Baptist Church became the womb of the civil rights movement, providing the leadership, the organizational structure, and the moral language that transformed the nation in the mid-20th century. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr. did not succeed despite their Baptist identity, but because of it, leveraging the tradition's deep-seated belief in the dignity of the individual and the supreme authority of a higher law. In the modern era, the Baptist legacy is one of perpetual renewal through fragmentation. The constant splintering into new conventions and associations is often viewed as a weakness, yet it is also the source of the movement's enduring vitality. Because Baptists lack a central human authority, they are forced to constantly return to the sources, the scriptures, to redefine their mission. As they move deeper into the 21st century, Baptists continue to shape the American landscape through their commitment to global missions, their influence on national politics, and their ongoing internal debates over gender, race, and the limits of cooperation. Ultimately, the Baptist story remains an unfinished narrative of a people who believe that the church is most powerful when it is free from the state, and that faith is most authentic when it is the unforced choice of the individual soul. The how of their survival has always been their refusal to stay still, and the why of their impact remains their unwavering conviction that every human being is competent to stand before God. As we survey the sprawling landscape of Baptist history, from the jail cells of 17th century London to the massive conventions and independent chapels of today, we are left with a fundamental question regarding the nature of faith. The Baptist story is, at its core, a celebration of the competency of the soul. It challenges us to consider, what does it mean to hold a conviction that is entirely your own? In an era of increasing polarization and digital echo chambers, the Baptist emphasis on soul liberty offers a timeless reminder that true belief cannot be inherited, coerced, or automated. It must be found, wrestled with, and personally confessed. Whether you find yourself within this tradition or simply an observer of it, reflect on the walls of separation in your own life, the boundaries that protect your conscience from the noise of the world. How are you stewarding the liberty that so many before you fought to secure? If this deep dive into the why and how of Baptist identity has sparked a desire for more theological clarity and historical depth, we invite you to join our growing community. Subscribe. For more in-depth explorations of the movements that shaped our world, subscribe to Theology today. Next week, our journey through the American religious tapestry is just beginning. Join us next week as we pivot from the fiercely autonomous world of the Baptists to the structured, intellectual, and deeply influential world of the progression of Presbyterianism in America. See you next week as we continue to unpack the history of the faith that built a nation.